Communication, it feels like it should be the simplest thing in the world, right? You talk, I listen. I send an email, you read it. But how often does it just go completely off the rails, turning tiny misunderstandings into huge problems? Well, today we're going to break down what's really going on. We're going to look at communication like an assembly line to find the exact points where it all falls apart.
And believe me, the stakes for getting this wrong can be incredibly high. Just look at aviation. A NASA study that spanned 20 years found that poor communication was a factor in about 70% of air accidents. I mean, that's not some tiny statistical error. That's the main reason things went catastrophically wrong.
Okay, but it's not just about life or death situations, right? It's happening in our workplaces every single day. Studies have shown that a mind-boggling 14% of every work week is just wasted on poor communication. Think about that. For a standard 40-hour week, you're losing almost a full workday. Just gone. Poof. Down the drain because the message just didn't land. Want to put a real dollar amount on it? Let's take Starbucks. Imagine if every barista in every store just misheard one single $10 order each day. Seems like a tiny mistake, doesn't it? Well, those little slip-ups would add up and cost the company $1 billion a year. That's with a B, all from simple, everyday miscommunication. The legendary CEO Lee Iacocca really hit the nail on the head with this one. This isn't just about avoiding disasters or saving money. You can have the most brilliant, world-changing idea, but if it's stuck inside your head, it's totally worthless. So to get those ideas out into the world, we first have to really understand the process itself. So where do we even start? Let's think about it like this. Communication is like an assembly line for our thoughts. An idea gets dreamed up, then it's got to be packaged, sent down this conveyor belt, and finally unpacked by someone on the other end. To figure out why it breaks down so often, we have to see how it's supposed to run in the first place. Okay, so first up on our assembly line is the sender. This is a person who has the idea, but an idea is just a thought, right? To send it to someone else, the sender has to encode it, and that means they're choosing the exact right words, the right tone of voice, maybe even the right emoji to wrap that thought up into a message that can be sent. Then you've got the message. This is the package itself, chugging along the conveyor belt. It could be an email, a text, a speech, whatever it is, it's the physical container for that idea, and it's on its way to its destination. And waiting at the end of the line, you have the receiver. Now, their job is anything but passive. They have to grab that package and decode it. They have to unwrap the words and symbols and try to rebuild the original idea. And this is where things get tricky, because the idea they unpack might look totally different from the one the sender originally packed up. So why does that happen? Well, it's because of this one thing. Noise. Noise is basically the villain in this whole story. It's anything and everything that messes with the message on its journey. And it's not just, a loud room or a bad cell signal. That's external noise. The really sneaky stuff is internal noise, like if the receiver is stressed out, distracted, or maybe their past experiences just make them interpret words in a completely different way. Okay, so we've got our assembly line mapped out. Sender, message, receiver. And we've got our villain, noise, trying to wreck it every step of the way. So now let's get really specific. We're going to go back to that line and pinpoint the exact spots where the signal usually gets lost and identify the biggest barriers that stop us from communicating effectively. This right here, this is like a map of all the potential potholes and roadblocks on our communication highway. As you can see, there are tons of them. Psychological, cultural, you name it. We're going to dive into some of the biggest ones, starting right back at the source. All right, let's head to station 1 on our assembly line, the sender. A lot of the time, the problem starts right here, before the message even leaves the station. A huge one is something called filtering. You've seen this, right? It's the manager who tells their boss sales are a little soft, when in reality, they're a total dumpster fire. They're filtering the bad news because they're afraid of the reaction. And what if the sender is just furious or really sad? That emotional state is a huge barrier. It's like a filter that changes their tone, their word choice. Everything gets warped by that internal noise. Okay, so let's say the sender is clear and calm. The message itself can still be a total mess. Even with the best intentions, the package they put together can be a minefield just waiting to blow up. Oh man, the big one here is jargon. Like when a doctor or a nurse throws around a bunch of super complex medical terms and the patient just sits there nodding, completely lost but too embarrassed to say anything. Or think about that old IBM example. GBS is focusing on BPTS. I mean, if you're in that tiny group of people who know the lingo, great. But for literally everyone else, it's just static. It's noise. All right, on to the final station, the receiver. And this is wild. You can have a perfect message from a totally clear-headed sender, and it can still crash and burn the second it arrives. Honestly, this is probably the most overlooked part of the whole communication puzzle. And the ways it can fail here are things we see every day. I'm talking about the boss who's so busy looking at their phone that they're only half listening. Or how about this one? Selective perception. That's when an employee only hears the parts of the message they want to hear. And you know what's interesting? That selective perception can be a direct result of the sender's filtering from earlier. It's a vicious cycle. The breakdown is almost always a two-way street. So we've got breakdowns at the sender, in the message, and with the receiver. But there's another level to this. There are these kind of invisible walls that are built into our cultures, our companies, and our societies, and they completely change the rules of the game. And maybe the biggest invisible wall of all is the difference between high context and low context cultures. So in a low context culture, like in the US or Germany, what you say is what you mean. The words are everything. Be direct, be clear. But in a high context culture, like Spain or Japan, the words are just one tiny piece of the puzzle. The real meaning is hidden in the context, in the relationship between people, in body language, even in the silence. There's this great story about Sam and Maria that shows this perfectly. So Sam, he's an American manager, totally low context. He wants direct answers. He asks Maria, his team lead from Spain, about a project deadline. And she says, "Let's hope we can fit all the planned activities in." Now to Maria, coming from a high context culture, she just screamed, "Red alert, we are not going to make this deadline." But what did Sam hear? He heard, "Sounds good to me, we're on track." He was waiting for her to say, flat out, "We need more time." So when the deadline blew by, they were both completely baffled and frustrated with each other, because in their own minds, they had both communicated perfectly. Wow, okay, so we've got filtering, jargon, information overload, massive cultural divides. It's enough to make you just want to stop talking altogether, right? With so many ways for our messages to get lost and misunderstood, how would we ever get it right? Well, here's the good news. It turns out there's one single, incredibly powerful tool that can cut through almost every single one of these barriers. So, with all these traps laid out, how on earth do we build a bridge across all these gaps? Well, the answer is surprisingly simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. It means we have to completely shift our focus, away from trying to be the perfect sender and toward becoming a world-class receiver. And this is the playbook. It comes from the psychologist Carl Rogers, and it's called active listening. It's about listening for the content, sure, but also for the feelings behind the words. It's about noticing all the cues, like Maria's hesitation. But that last one, number 5, that's the magic key. Paraphrase and restate. If Sam had been an active listener, he would have said something like, "Okay, so what it sounds like you're telling me is that you're worried we might not hit the deadline. Is that right?" Boom, that one question. It's the ultimate undo button. It would have saved the entire project right there.
I mean, really think about it for a second. How often, when someone else is talking, are we really listening? Or are we just waiting for them to take a breath so we can jump in and say what we want to say? Active listening is about doing the opposite, being quiet, being present. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. When was the last time you stopped rehearsing your next line and just truly listened?